Welcome friends, welcome to another video lecture of Biovision Academy. And students, in today's video lecture, we are going to discuss about the Lineweaver Burk plot, or you can call it double reciprocal plot. Okay, students, the Lineweaver Burk plot or double reciprocal plot is the modification of Maclaurin-Menschen equation. Okay, or simply you can say that the Lineweaver Burk plot or double reciprocal plot is the reciprocal of Maclaurin-Menschen equation. Okay, now the question is why there is a need of double reciprocal plot or the Lineweaver Burk plot. Okay, students, now suppose that it is a Maclaurin-Menschen equation, okay, in which V0 is equal to V max into S upon Km plus S. This is the Maclaurin-Menschen equation. Okay, so students, this Maclaurin-Menschen equation used to calculate the Vmax and Km of an enzymatic reaction. Okay, now when we use this equation to draw a graph, then we got a hyperbolic curve. Okay, and this hyperbolic curve representing the Vmax and Km. Okay, now what is Vmax? Okay, student, Vmax is the maximum velocity of an enzyme. Okay, or you can say that Vmax is the saturation point of an enzymatic reaction in which all the enzymes molecules are saturated, or you can say if we have 10 enzyme molecules, then all 10 enzymes molecules are bound with 10 substrate. So this is the saturation point, and when all enzymes molecule bind with all substrate, it means now enzyme has reaches to its maximum velocity, that is the Vmax. Okay, now and what is Km? Students, Km is that substrate concentration in which Vmax is half of its maximum velocity. Okay, suppose that this is the overall Vmax and this is the half of the Vmax. So if we match this point with the substrate concentration, then we got this point. Okay, we got this point. So Km is the half of the Vmax. Okay, or you can say Km is that substrate concentration. Okay, Km is that substrate concentration at which Vmax is half of its maximum velocity. Okay, so this is the Km. Okay, so students, now when we are trying to calculate Vmax and Km by using a hyperbolic curve, then the value is not very much accurate. Okay, so we use the Lineweaver Burk plot or double reciprocal plot to calculate the exact value of Vmax and Km. Okay, now let's understand what is this Lineweaver Burk plot. Let's understand this. Now, students, we have the Maclaurin-Menschen equation. Okay, this is the Maclaurin-Menschen equation, that is V0 is equal to Vmax into S upon Km plus S. Okay, this is the simple Maclaurin-Menschen equation. Okay, now we just reciprocal this overall value. So for reciprocal we have 1 by V0, and now this is the beginning of reciprocal. Now we have Vmax into S upon Km plus S. Okay, so students, Now this overall value is divided by 1. So after reciprocal, this Km plus Km plus S, it just goes here. So now we got Km plus S. Let me write down here. Now we have 1 by V0 is equal to Km plus S upon V max into S. Okay. Now student, in next step we just separate the Km and V max. Okay. So when we separate the Km and V max, then the overall value is Km upon V max into S plus S upon V max into S. Okay. So now this S is cancelled. So 1 by V0 is equal to Km upon V max. Okay. And in next step we also separate this substrate. So now this 1 by S plus 1 upon V max. Okay students, so this is the Lineweaver Burk plot, or you can call it double reciprocal plot. Okay. Now student, this 1 upon V0 is equal to Km upon V max into 1 by S plus 1 upon V max is you can write down, or you can say it is similar to y is equal to mx plus c. Okay. Y is equal to mx plus c. Okay. This is the slope. Okay. This is slope. This is x and this is c. Okay. So now let's draw this 1 upon V0 is equal to Km upon V max into 1 by x plus 1 upon V max in the form of y is equal to mx plus c. Okay. Y is equal to mx plus c. Okay. Let's draw this overall equation in this format. Okay. Let's draw this. Now, okay, so let's draw this graph. Okay. Got it? So students, now this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. As I told you, x-axis represent the substrate concentration, whereas y-axis represent the velocity. Okay. And suppose that this is a reaction of this is an enzymatic reaction. So this intercept represent 1 minus Km. This is the slope represent Km by V max, and this intercept represent 1 by V max. Okay. 1 by V max. Okay. Now So student, this is the representation of the Lineweaver Burk plot, or you can call it the double reciprocal plot. Okay, now student, the Lineweaver Burk plot or double reciprocal plot is used to draw the graph of competitive inhibition, non-competitive inhibition, uncompetitive inhibition and mixed inhibition. Okay, student, you know that during the enzymatic inhibition, the Km and the Vmax of an enzymatic reaction is affected. Okay, so now let's understand how the Km and Vmax are represented in the Lineweaver Burk plot. Let's understand this. Okay, now, okay, so students, suppose that it is the x-axis, okay, and this is the y-axis. Okay, so students, this is the point of interception. Got it? Now students, first let's understand about the Km. Okay, students, Km explain the affinity of an enzyme. Okay, affinity of an enzyme. Got it? And Km is inversely proportional to affinity. Got it? Km is inversely proportional to affinity. It means if Km increases, then affinity decreases. It means if Km increases, then affinity of an enzyme to the substrate is decreases, and if Km decreases, it means affinity increases. So if Km decreases and affinity increases, it means the affinity of an enzyme is increases for the substrate. Okay, now, so students, in Lineweaver Burk plot, if we go right side, then the value of Km increases. The value of Km increases, it means affinity decreases. It means affinity decreases. Okay, and if we go left side, then the Km decreases. It means affinity increases. It means the affinity of enzyme with the substrate increases, and if Km increases, it means affinity of enzyme with the substrate decreases. Got it? Now, so this is when we go from left side and then we go from right side. Okay, now let's understand about the Vmax. Okay, this is the Vmax. And what is Vmax? So student, Vmax is the saturation point of an enzyme in which, or you can say it is the maximum velocity of an enzyme at which the enzyme is fully saturated with the substrate. It means if we have 5 or you can say 6 enzyme molecules, suppose that these are the enzyme molecules, and if we have 10 substrate, then Vmax is the condition at which all the enzymes molecule are combined with, or you can say bind with the substrate. So this is the Vmax. Okay. Now, student, in Lineweaver Burk plot, if we go upward direction, okay, from this point, if we goes to upward direction, then the value of Vmax decreases. Okay, value of Vmax decreases if we go upward direction. Okay, and if we go in downward direction, okay, if we go in downward direction, then the value of Vmax increases. Okay, then the value of Vmax increases. Correct, friends? So upward direction Vmax decreases, downward direction Vmax increases. Okay, right-handed direction Km increases, so affinity of enzyme with the substrate decreases, and in left-handed direction Km decreases, it means affinity of an enzyme for the substrate increases. Okay, so student, this is the Lineweaver Burk plot. Okay, now students, let's draw the graph of competitive inhibition, uncompetitive inhibition, non-competitive inhibition and mixed inhibition by using the Lineweaver Burk plot. Okay, let's understand this. Okay, now, so student, let's first draw the graph of competitive inhibition. Okay, graph of competitive inhibition. Okay, so suppose that, student, you know that in competitive inhibition the Km value is increases. Okay, the Km value is increases, so affinity of an enzyme with the substrate is decreases. Okay, so students, let's draw the competitive inhibition graph in the presence of inhibitor and without inhibitor. Okay, let's draw it. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is the x-axis, this is y-axis. Let me draw this with the white color. Okay, so students, we draw two lines. Okay, one in the presence of inhibitor and another one is in the absence of inhibitor. So let's draw first in the presence, in the absence of inhibitor. Okay, so suppose that, students, in the absence of an inhibitor, the enzyme show this velocity. Okay, so this is the Vmax. Okay, this is the Vmax. Okay, this is 1 by Km. This is Km upon Vmax, that is slope. Okay, this is substrate concentration. Okay, this is 1 by substrate concentration and this is the velocity. This is the velocity. Okay, so students, you know that in competitive inhibition the Km increases and Vmax remain same. It means in the presence of inhibitor there is no effect in the Vmax, okay, or you can say there is no effect on the maximum velocity of an enzymatic reaction, because in the presence of inhibitor we can attain the Vmax by increasing the substrate concentration. Okay, so Km increases, it means now the enzyme has lower affinity for the substrate and Vmax remains same. So suppose that this is in the absence of inhibitor. Okay, the I represent absence of inhibitor. So now in the presence of inhibitor, so students, when we draw the graph in the presence of inhibitor, then Vmax remains same but Km increases. It means now this line shifted towards the right side. Okay, shifted towards the right side. So now the graph is something like this. Okay, now okay, so first time in the absence of inhibitor the Km value is here, but after inhibitor the Km is increases. It means the graph is shifted towards the right side from this position to this position. Okay, so this is in the presence of inhibitor. So students, in the absence or in the presence of inhibitor the intercept value is same, so 1 by Vmax is always same. Okay students, so if we increases the substrate concentration then the graph is shifted most towards the right side. Okay, so in this case the graph is slightly V shape. The graph is V shape. Okay friends, so this is the double reciprocal plot of competitive inhibition. Got it? Now let's draw the Lineweaver Burk plot for non-competitive inhibition. Okay, non-competitive inhibition. This is non-competitive inhibition. Got it? So students, you know that in non-competitive inhibition the binding site of inhibitor and substrate are different on the same enzyme molecule. So the binding of inhibitor does not affect the binding of substrate and binding of substrate does not affect the binding of inhibitor. So the Km value is not affected. Okay, so in non-competitive inhibition the Km value is remains same. It means Km same means affinity not affected. Affinity, or you can say affinity remains same. Affinity same, but Vmax decreases. But Vmax decreases. Okay, so now let's draw the graph of non-competitive inhibition. Okay, so this is x-axis, this is y-axis. Okay, so let's first draw the graph in the absence of inhibitor. So suppose that this is the graph in the absence of inhibitor. Okay, this is the 1 by Vmax, that is the maximum velocity. This is the velocity of an enzymatic reaction. Okay, now this is the substrate concentration and this is the Km. Okay, and the slope represent the Km by Vmax. Okay, Km by V max. Okay, so students, now in the presence of inhibitor, Km remains same, but the affinity Km remains same, it means affinity for the enzyme remains same, but Vmax decreases. So it means if we go upward direction, then Vmax decreases, but the Km remains same. So now the graph is something like this. Okay, the Km remains same. So here this is the enzymatic reaction. So now the Km remains same and Vmax decreases. So as I told you, if you go upward direction, then the Vmax decreases. So Km is here and Vmax shifted to this shape. Okay, so now the Km is this in the presence of inhibitor. Okay, so you can say that Vmax is decreasing from this point to this point, 1 by Vmax, but the Km is remain same. It means in the presence of inhibitor or in the absence of inhibitor, there is no effect on the Km value. So this is the graph of non-competitive inhibition. Okay students, now let's draw the next graph for uncompetitive inhibition. Okay, for uncompetitive inhibition. Now, so let's draw the graph for uncompetitive inhibition. Uncompetitive inhibition. This is okay. Now, students, in uncompetitive inhibition, you know that the binding of inhibitor supported by the binding of substrate. Okay, so when substrate bind to an enzyme molecule, then it creates site for the binding of inhibitor. So if more substrate is bind, then more site is created for the binding of inhibitor. So in uncompetitive inhibition, the binding of inhibitor depend upon the binding of substrate. Okay, so the affinity of an enzyme is more for substrate. Okay, so it means Km value is decreases. Okay, but due to the binding of inhibitor, the Vmax is decreases. Okay, so let's draw the graph for uncompetitive inhibition. Okay, now here, so this is the 1 by S, this is the substrate concentration, this is 1 by V0 velocity, this is the enzymatic reaction in the absence of inhibitor, this is 1 by Vmax, that is the maximum velocity, and this is the Km. Okay, now, so students, in uncompetitive inhibition, the Km is decreases. It means affinity of an enzyme for the substrate is increases, but the Vmax decreases. So now the Km is shifted toward this left side. Okay, the Km is shifted from this point to this point. So and Vmax decreases. So Vmax shifted here. So now the graph is something like this. Okay, so Km is here, so it is shifted here. So now the Vmax is shifted from this point to this point. Okay, so here the Km, okay, 1 by Km, the shifted is this. Okay, so here you can observe that the Vmax shifted from this point to this point. So 1 by Vmax decreases and Km is increases. So this is the point. Okay, so this is in the presence of inhibitor. Okay students, so this is the graph Lineweaver Burk plot for the uncompetitive inhibition. Got it friends? Now let's draw the graph for mixed inhibition. Okay, for mixed inhibition. Got it? So now students, you know that in mixed inhibition, okay, in mixed inhibition, okay, the binding of inhibitor with the enzyme are of two types. Enzyme inhibitor may be bind to enzyme alone and forms enzyme inhibitor complex, or maybe enzyme when bind with substrate form enzyme substrate complex, then inhibitor binds and forms enzyme substrate inhibitor complex, or after the formation of enzyme inhibition the substrate may bind and forms enzyme substrate inhibitor complex. So students, it means the inhibitor may bind with the enzymes alone, or it may bind to the enzyme substrate inhibitor enzyme substrate complex. So binding of inhibitor does not require substrate, and it may be bind with the enzyme substrate complex. So in both the cases the Km may increase or Km may decrease. Okay, so if enzyme bind with the inhibitor first, then in this case the Km is increases. It means the value of enzyme with the substrate decreases. In this case enzyme bind with the substrate. Okay, so in that case the Km for enzyme substrate is decreases. So students, in mixed inhibition Km may increase or decrease, but Vmax is always decreases. Okay, so Vmax always decreases, but the value of Km may increase or decrease. If inhibitor bind first, then it decreases the affinity of enzyme with substrate. It means the Km values increases, and if enzyme bind with the substrate, it means the enzyme has more affinity for the substrate. It means Km decreases. Okay, so in mixed inhibition the value of Km or maybe increase or decrease, but the value of Vmax is always decreases. Okay, so let's draw the graph for mixed inhibition. Okay, now, so students, let me draw this x-axis, this is y-axis. Okay, now students, I am going to draw the first line in the presence of inhibitor. Okay, so in the presence of inhibitor, it means the graph is more shifted towards the right side. Okay, so here in the presence of inhibitor, so this is 1 by Vmax. Let me draw this slightly upper, so it will give a good representation. Yeah, this is the better representation. Okay, this is the graph in the presence of inhibitor. So students, this is minus 1 by Km. Okay, so student, if in the presence of inhibitor the graph is said, so it decreases the affinity of enzyme with the substrate. Okay, so now the Vmax is decreases, but Km is increases. So now the graph is shifted towards this direction, and now the graph is something like this. Okay, so here the Km is shifted from this point to this point. Okay, this is the first, this is the 1 by Vmax is also decreases. So here let me draw this like this. This is the graph. Okay, now, okay student, this is the example when inhibitor binds first. So if inhibitor binds first, so it decreases the affinity of an enzyme with the substrate. So Vmax decreases and Km increases. So here this. Okay, now let's draw this graph when enzyme bind with the substrate first and then inhibitor bind. Okay, let's draw this graph. Okay, so students, suppose that enzyme bind with the substrate first. Okay, so if enzyme bind with the substrate first, then suppose that the value is this, means in the absence of inhibitor the Vmax is same and 1 by Km, this. Okay, this is 1 by Km and this is the 1 by Vmax. So if inhibitor not binding, it means enzyme bind with the substrate first. Okay, so binding of enzyme with the substrate first decreases the affinity of inhibitor for the enzymes. Okay, but inhibitor may bind to the enzyme substrate complex. So in this case the Vmax decreases. Okay, so but there is no effect in the binding of substrate with enzyme. So Km is it means the binding of substrate is more for the enzyme, so graph is shifted towards this point. Okay, so now this Km. Okay, so this is the in the presence of inhibitor. So in this case you can observe that the Km is decreases, but in this case the Km increases, and in both the case Vmax is decreases. Okay friends, so this is the Lineweaver Burk plot for mixed inhibition. Okay friends, so friends, this is all about the Lineweaver Burk plot. Okay students, we have discussed about the uncompetitive inhibition, non-competitive inhibition, mixed inhibition, okay, and competitive inhibition. So this is all about the Lineweaver Burk plot. So friends, I hope now you have a very good idea about what is Lineweaver Burk plot, what is the Vmax, what is Km, when Vmax decreases, when Vmax increases, when Km increases, when Km decreases. Okay, and we also plot the graph for each and every type of inhibition. Okay friends, So friends, if you like this video, then please share this video with your friends. Please do subscribe our channel, and friends, please don't forget to press the bell icon so next time when we upload a new video you will get the notification. Okay friends, so friends, thank you very much for your patience, full hearing. Have a nice day.